Hi, I'm Dan Morgan, and these are my words to live by. So imagine a scenario where you find yourself caught in a familiar and repetitive cycle of conflict with a loved one. Perhaps you're simply discussing household chores, and then before you know it, you're both pointing the fingers of blame and shame at each other. Perhaps you feel victimized by the other person or the circumstance, or you feel a need to somehow save or rescue the other person or the situation. Well, this scenario illustrates what psychologists call the drama triangle, a dynamic interplay of roles that often lead to repetitive cycles of conflict and dysfunction. Hi, I'm Dan Morgan, a transformational life coach, and in this brief talk today, we're going to delve into a few different models that I feel support each other wonderfully. We'll talk firstly about the drama triangle, secondly about transactional analysis and life positions, and then finally we'll explore how the empowerment dynamic triangle can be used to break us free from these patterns of conflict. So let's begin first by diving into the drama triangle. The drama triangle was conceptualized and popularized by a psychiatrist called Dr. Stephen Karpman in the early 60s. It consists of 3 different roles. So imagine a triangle, and at each of the points sit one of the roles. We have the victim, the persecutor, and the rescuer. I'm going to explain them to you one by one. So the victim often feels powerless and oppressed. They tend to blame other people or external circumstances for their problems or the suffering that they experience. They're likely to seek sympathy or rescuing from other people, and sadly this only perpetuates a sense of helplessness that they continue to feel. Next, we have the persecutor. The persecutor adopts a critical, judgmental, or aggressive stance, and they're likely to blame, shame, and attack others. They like to be in control, and they tend to seek and assert dominance or superiority. And then finally, we have the rescuer. They love to swoop in and save the day, but more often than not, it's at their own expense. They tend to enable others' dependency by constantly providing support or solutions. They love to fix the problem. So before we dive into any specific example, I want to say that this model is universal and it's applicable to all relational dynamics. So whether that's with your colleagues in work, with friends, with family, and so on. So with that said, let's take a common example seen within domestic situations. We have person A, we'll call them Sarah, and we have person B, we'll call them Tom. Sarah simply asks Tom to take out the bins while she's out running some errands. So she comes home, and sadly, Tom hasn't taken the bins out. Why? He simply forgot. But Sarah reacts strongly and quickly. You forgot to take the bins out again. I can't believe I have to remind you every single time. It's not that hard to remember such a simple task. You're so lazy, Tom, and you're so irresponsible. Tom responds, I'm sorry, okay? I just forgot. You don't have to be so harsh about it. I'm always trying my best for you, but nothing that I do ever feels good enough. You make me feel like a terrible person. In this scenario, Sarah takes on the role of the persecutor by criticizing and blaming Tom for forgetting to take out the bins. Sarah's tone is accusatory and judgmental, and this causes Tom to feel inadequate. He feels attacked by Sarah. And so, Tom assumes the role of the victim. He responds defensively, seeking sympathy and validation, which only makes Sarah more angry, and this perpetuates the dynamic of the conflict because she just wants him to take ownership for his mistake. And so, Tom and Sarah find themselves stuck in the drama triangle. So now that we've explored the drama triangle, maybe you're starting to recognize which of these roles feel familiar to you and your life. And now let's continue to add a little more depth to your understanding by discussing transactional analysis and life positions, which influence the role that we tend to play within different relationships and within conflict. So transactional analysis was developed by a psychiatrist called Dr. Berne in the 50s and the 60s. And for the ease of the explanation for this next part, I'm going to break it down into 2 sections. Firstly, I'll explain transactional analysis and the ego states, and then secondly, I'll explain the 4 life positions. So transactional analysis offers insight into how we communicate and behave within relationships through the lens of 3 different ego states. We have the parent ego state, the child ego state, and the adult ego state. So we'll begin with the parent ego state. This can manifest in two different ways. Firstly, with the overbearing parent, the parent that can't do enough. And then secondly, the critical parent, the parent where nothing is ever good enough for them. So if we're behaving in this ego state, we're often reflecting and mirroring the behaviors or the communication patterns learnt from authority figures in our early years. So essentially, we behave and communicate like our parents, grandparents, or for instance, teachers did towards us when we were growing up. Next comes the child ego state. And this, again, can manifest in two different ways. The adaptive child, the child willing to be or do whatever they feel they need to, or the free or rebellious child, the child that does as they wish, or counter to what is expected of them. In this ego state, we are behaving and communicating in similar ways that we did when we were children ourselves. And finally, the adult ego state. When we're in this state, we are rational, we're objective, and this enables us to respond adaptively in various situations. So in context of the drama triangle, these ego states influence the roles that we adopt. For example, a person operating from the critical parent ego state may be more likely to assume the role of the persecutor, while someone in an adaptive child ego state may feel like they need to forego their needs for others, and so they adopt the role of the rescuer. Next, I'd like to outline part 2, which is life positions. And these are representative of our fundamental beliefs about ourselves in relation to the other people in our lives. And there are 4 primary life positions. Firstly, I'm okay and you're okay. This position fosters mutual respect and understanding, and it promotes a healthy relationship dynamic. This is usually seen when we're no longer in the drama triangle. Next, we have I'm okay and you're not okay. If we're in this position, we often feel superior or judgmental towards others. Next, we have I'm not okay and you are okay. If we're in this position, we feel inferior or unworthy in comparison to other people. And finally, we have I'm not okay and you're not okay. This position speaks to a sense of hopelessness and general despair felt by both people. And whilst this is nuance, and there's nuance to this, and each life position could be applied to all of the roles in the drama triangle. But to generalize slightly, for the context of its application to the drama triangle, individuals operating from a negative life position, one where they feel inferior, are more likely to assume the role of the victim or the persecutor. And those operating from a more positive life position, one where they feel superior, are more likely to assume the role of the rescuer or the persecutor, but for a different reason. Recognizing and challenging these life positions is essential if you wish to break free from the drama triangle and if you wish to foster healthier interactions and relationships with those that you love. So now that we have more awareness about why we can find ourselves stuck in these repetitive cycles, what can we do to change it? Enter the final model of the day or this talk, the empowerment dynamic triangle, introduced by David Emerald, who was a renowned leadership coach in the early 2000s. His model offers a positive alternative to the drama triangle, and he has 3 alternative roles to those that we see within the drama triangle. And his roles are the creator, the challenger, and the coach. So I'll briefly break down each of those roles. So the creator takes ownership of the situation. They recognize their roles within conflict, and they take proactive steps to address it themselves. The challenger encourages growth and accountability in others. And the coach provides support and guidance, empowering individuals to navigate the challenges themselves, to find self-reliance and autonomy. When we're able to use our awareness to be responsive with our behavior and communication, we are then able to create a shift, either from victim to creator, from persecutor to challenger, or from rescuer to coach. So with everything that I've shared, let's see how this would shift the impact in the scenario that I mentioned earlier. Rather than Sarah being a persecutor, she would assume the role of the challenger, compassionately encouraging Tom to take accountability. And rather than Tom being a victim, he would be a creator taking responsibility and being proactive in finding a resolution for the conflict at hand. From a place of adult to adult, or I'm okay and you're okay, They can then both collaborate to problem solve to stop this happening again in the future. So to conclude, I hope that what I've shared with you today initiates the process of you developing a little more awareness about the roles that you personally play and that others play in your life when in situations of conflict or disagreement, and also the wider context of how this then influences your various relationships. Remember, it all begins with awareness.